Welcome back. As you know, we've been covering the Wuhan lab leak since day one, and the New York Post editorial board is out with a new piece this morning titled "Fauci and Company Need to Pay a Price for Funding Wuhan lab research and Trying to Cover it Up." My next guest questioned Dr. Fauci's top aide over the use of his personal email accounts to evade the Freedom of Information Act. Watch this.
The relationship between your organization, NIH, and EcoHealth should be one of oversight. And you said, to start off this hearing, you said, we all felt it was our job to cheer Peter up. Peter even admitted the last time that he did not do a good job of overseeing the grant that went to the Wuhan lab. It's clear that our government did not do a good job of overseeing EcoHealth.
Fauci is set to testify before the House subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic this coming Monday. Joining me now is Texas Congressman Michael Cloud, a member of the House Appropriations and Oversight Committees, as well as the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic. Congressman, thanks very much for being here this morning. What should we expect from that hearing on Monday?
Well, you know, Fauci's a slippery guy, and I'm sure he'll try to dance around the answers. The odd thing, even in the deposition we've had with him and in previous conversation with him, he seems to look at this COVID thing that we all went through, millions of lives lost, as almost his personal science fair project. And it's really disturbing. It'll be interesting to see how he answers the new information that's come forth about the attempts to avoid FOIA within his organization. And surely he's wrapped up in that with everyone around him skirting FOIA through personal email use. It's hard to see how he would not be implicated in that.
So what do you think went on here?
Well, one of the very first things Dr. Morin said, he felt like it was his job almost. He said, you know, Fauci doesn't like anything coming to him personally, almost like it was his job to kind of be a fence for him. It'll be interesting to see, you know, and Fauci's got a lot to answer for sure. You know, we've seen now, we know dollars from EcoHealth went to the Wuhan lab. We know that Peter, I even asked Peter Daszak, I said, knowing what you know now, if you had to do anything again, would you make any changes? He said, no, it was great. We would do the same thing. Thankfully, his funding's been withdrawn. But my concern all along has been they're going to try to pin him as a fall guy, or now Marin's as a fall guy, when we know that this is broader than those two individuals.
So the NIH and Fauci's group were funding the Wuhan lab and gain-of-function research. And then once the lab leak happened, creating this deadly pandemic, killing millions across the world, they tried to cover it up?
That's what it certainly looks like right now. And of course, you know, everybody says, well, there's no smoking gun. Well, we know that the Wuhan lab destroyed data. And so we don't have the data, but we have the evidence that they destroyed the data. And so this is the situation we find ourselves in, where, again, these individuals seem to have done more since then even. And even after we know that they've destroyed data, even after our intelligence communities are coming out, they seem to do more to protect everything that went on and to protect even this Wuhan lab than they have to come forth and say, hey, there's some things we need to fix. There's some things we need to change. Understandably, if they're implicated in it, they want to absolve themselves of any guilt. But the American people definitely want to see accountability when it comes to what's going on in COVID.
And that's why we're talking about your hearing on Monday. I mean, it really strikes me, Emily, that we are 4 years into this, 4 years after this whole cover-up, and this administration has still yet to hold China to account for their cover-up.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things that we've seen over and over in the oversight efforts from the congressmen and others. When I talk to folks on the Hill, it's one of our top priorities to see, members want to see in the appropriations bills. They want to see guardrails put up so these kinds of mistakes can't happen again, and so that we don't end up in these partnerships with China that take us down this road in the future.
And I spoke with the chairman of that subcommittee last year, months ago, who told us all of this, laid it out for us, Brad Wenstrup. Here he is with me last year.
Dr. Morin was an advisor to Dr. Fauci. What we have found when we get into internal documents is Dr. Morin actually said to those that were working with Dr. Fauci to claim that the COVID virus came from nature, he told them, I want you to email me on my Gmail because these blankety blanks are FOIA-ing me, and I don't want them to see things. So if I have it on my Gmail, I delete what I don't want to get into New York Times, which is illegal.
Congressman, how many times did he delete things that he wasn't supposed to delete from his personal email?
Oh, It was at least a dozen times or more, just in the handful of emails that we had. And this was the absurdity of the last hearing. We fully expected him to plead the fifth, which probably would have been better for him. It's certainly better for the American people that we got to see what we saw. But he kept saying, oh, this was just for personal use. Well, you read through the emails, they're obviously talking about grants. He's actually advising EcoHealth on tweets even that they should do on their submission and reporting and those kind of things. And literally in one of those emails, he says, I'll take this to Fauci, or he says, I'll take this to Tony today. So obviously he's doing official business on his personal Gmail. And over again, he talks about the reason why, and it was to avoid FOIA.
And they I guess, didn't want to upset the grants, the money that they were getting. It was about money as well.
Yeah, it certainly was. You have Marin's one of his best friends in Dosick, and you have him working for Fauci for 25 years.
Right.
It seemed
Let me switch gears.
interdealing.
Let me switch gears. We'll be watching that for sure, and we want to cover this closely on Monday. But let me switch gears, ask you about former President Trump's New York trial. Resuming this morning at 10 a.m. Eastern, Judge Merchan will give instructions to the jury, and then they will begin deliberating. During the prosecution's closing arguments yesterday, Trump took to Truth Social, writing this, boring. Trump also called out President Biden before heading into the courtroom. Watch this.
Make no mistake about it. I'm here because of crooked Joe Biden. The worst president in the history of our country is destroying our country. This country is being destroyed rapidly, not slowly, rapidly. On the borders, on energy, on inflation, on everything you can name. Afghanistan removal. And he's also destroying it with weaponization.
Congressman, you were at the trial last week. What's your reaction to the closing arguments? What insight can you share with us in terms of what you've witnessed? Or do you think the jury will be fair here? How will they deliberate?
A lot of it's going to come down to the judge's instructions. If this was a case on the merits, we would be looking at a chance of acquittal here. But this judge has put his finger on the scale in so many ways. And just being in the courtroom even a couple hours, you can see the difference between what he was sustaining in the way of objections versus upholding for the prosecution or defense. I'd like to think the jury would see through that because it was pretty blatant. And they seem to be paying attention and taking the role seriously. But we'll see. These instructions are going to weigh heavily on it, and the fact that he would not let a witness come who was an expert in the election law when they're coming up with an obscure crime that President Trump allegedly committed. He would be the first person ever to have committed this crime and certainly been tried on it because it's kind of an invented crime. But we'll be watching those instructions for sure because that could weigh heavily on the jury. I like to think we'll see at least a hung jury and President Trump be able to continue his campaign and continue to work for the American people. Your
colleague, New York Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, is breaking news this morning. She is saying that she wants an investigation of what she's saying. She's filing a misconduct lawsuit against Judge Merchan overseeing this trial right now. Congressman, do you have questions about the judge in terms of why he is the judge taking on this case? Stefanik seems to feel that there's misconduct here. She's filing suit this morning.
Certainly, from his own personal campaign donations to his daughter and what she does to raise money. You start with the political bent. You add to that the gag order. You add to that what he's done to sustain. You add him not allowing testimony from the defense. You add to that the instruction he's giving the jury. There is a clear bias in this. It's really unfortunate because our whole way of life here in the United States is based on the rule of law, and he is no doubt perverting that.
Yeah, and she writes on X that she wants to call for an investigation to determine whether the required random selection process was in fact followed when Merchan was handed the case brought against Mr. Trump by Alvin Bragg. We don't know how that process took place, but she says it wasn't random at all.
Well, it would honestly be surprising if it does.
Okay.
If it was, I should say.
Congressman, thank you. We'll be following all of that. Thanks very much for being here. Michael Cloud joining us. Quick break and then more on President Trump's New York trial. We're expecting the judge to give the jury instructions today. Then they will go deliberate. We're not sure how long the deliberations will take. Former federal prosecutor Andrew Cherkasky is here with reaction. You're watching Mornings with Maria live on